before, as a businesswoman, I am so type A. Everything was under my control. Now I have lost so much. I don't have that control with a newborn. Like, she's going to do what she's going to do right now.
Yep.
And I've had to understand that and flow with that. And I think, like, taking that into business, which I think my employees are probably getting a kick out of seeing me like this, because they're like, thank you, that this is what she needed. Like, settle down.
Welcome to Ace Proudly Talks for the Superstars. Tonight,
Hello, welcome to another episode of Love and Business. I am Mick Arnold, president of Arnold Packaging and Arnold Automation.
And I am Britt Arnold, president of Tegler Construction and Supply.
You know, Britt, before we get started today, we need to address an elephant in the room. If you're an avid follower of the Love and Business podcast, we owe you a sincere apology because you've been duped. Britt has been sitting over here all along as if nothing has been going on, occasionally short of breath, not tipping her hand at all. When all along, she has been carrying this little nugget named Moxy. 7 pounds, and you can see she's a feisty one. She takes after her mother. So she has finally arrived, and we are super, super excited about it. Well, what a 9+ month adventure. I can't remember how many weeks it is exactly, but I think it's a little over 9 months. And I think, for the viewers that do watch a lot, and I went back and watched a number of our episodes just coming into this, you definitely didn't tip your hand at all. It was virtually impossible to know that you were carrying Mox if you didn't know what to look for. And that obviously had me with a lot of questions. I think one, as a first-time parent, for you, of course, there's all of these things that you think will be one way, and they end up being something completely wrong. I think we'd probably call that a made-up story on our podcast. Can you think of one that you were certain was X based on everything you've been told or experienced, and just like that, it turned out to be Y?
I can't, and I will tell you why. Because growing up, and even very recently, I never thought much about having children. Not that I wasn't disinterested, it just wasn't top of mind. For so long, I have been so focused on my career. It was either my career or my athletic. That was a career too. My athletic career, athletic goals, but career.
Yeah.
And that was top of mind. And I was motivated and driven to build the business we have today and, other entrepreneurial ventures that we've worked on together. So even when we first started dating, my goals were all business. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't have kids in mind. All that to say, I didn't have a lot of made-up stories because this wasn't necessarily in my view, in my trajectory of life, like what I thought my life would be. But I can certainly tell you this experience has been completely different than I could have ever imagined had I been imagining it. And I think one question I should answer, because I'm sure it's on some people's mind, is, well, if children wasn't something you thought about often, what changed? And maybe it was just getting to a certain point in my career, getting a little bit older, and you evolve and change as a human, but it was also being with you. Mm-hmm. And I tell a lot of people, when you are with the right person, at least for me, like I wanted to have Moxy or a child with you, period. Like it wasn't necessarily like I want a kid. It was like, I want a kid with you. And so I think when you're with the right person, I know what you want in life can change. And that completely changed for me. So she is a representation of us and like our relationship and what we've built. And that's everything I could have ever wanted. So that's answering that question. As far as motherhood and let's just say parenthood, I'm sure it is very different, especially in the beginning, because mothers carry babies for 9 months. I think that my relationship with Moxy out of the womb is a lot different than yours. And I think for any mother, it's going to be a lot different than the father to start. Mm-hmm. But it's something I can't explain. Like I am not typically short on words, I haven't quite been able to wrap my head around motherhood or be able to explain it. It's like it's the most amazing thing I've ever experienced in my entire life. Like being with you and having a child, and I still can't put it into words. So maybe one day I'll try, but right now I don't even feel confident enough, because I can't explain it. Like it's so beyond words. It is. I was telling my parents about this. I'm like, how come I didn't know? Like this is it like this secret club? Like all these people that are mothers and fathers know. Like how did I not know how incredible it is? Or was I not listening because I didn't care? Or people not talking about it enough? Because I've been so fortunate to experience so many really incredible things in my life, and this is like nothing I can possibly explain. It like the emotion it brings out in me. I don't know. I can't explain it.
That's a great question. I think one of the reasons that you may not have had a lot of time to get your head around some of the exact pieces is the first weeks are really hard. There's not a lot of excess bandwidth. There's not a lot of thinking time, and you are in such a reactive position so much. In that, yes, you try to plan, and there's so many more resources now than ever in the history of history as it relates to what to do and trusted advice and reviews and all the things that you lean on heavily. But, it's like Mike Tyson said, I mean, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. And I think, when baby arrives, that's akin to getting punched in the face. And because they're all different, they all have their nuances. They all speak a little bit different language, which is like a puzzle that you have to figure out. And I would be interested, as we go through the podcast and you have some of these epiphanies, and me too, of course, that we put those out there to the audience once maybe some of the fog clears as it relates to, getting her acclimated, and the fact that feedings happen every 2 hours, and that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah,
and,
sure. There's all those very specifics.
Yeah, there's the fog of war that
Yeah.
I think might have us a little bit unable at this exact moment, just 6 weeks in, to figure out some of that stuff. But I completely agree with you, and I don't know, maybe there's a that really intimate component of it that keeps you from screaming it from the hilltops, which seems like it would make sense.
Yeah, and something my parents have always told me is having a kid, like you can't describe it, and there's no love like it. I think there is for your partner, and then your children, and you can't describe that love until you have a child. And that is 100% true, but it's so much more than that for me. Like I don't even know. And when I get obsessed and in love with things, I think maybe I feel that more than a lot of people. Like I am very extreme and obsessive and not with a ton of things, but certain things. And so maybe I'm feeling like that extremeness of like this. But I think obviously a lot of people can relate. It just amazed me, the whole experience and how I feel now and how little I've heard anybody talk about it. But again, maybe I just wasn't listening.
Yeah, that could be.
I don't know.
That could be. I think there's some interesting topics for us to get into too. So one thing I recalled as we were setting up and doing our work for this episode, I remember early in our pregnancy we had conversations about being really intentional in keeping the news to ourselves. We're not, this always cracks me up. I'm like, we're not public people as we sit here on a podcast for an hour and some change every other week.
In certain things.
But in certain things, right. I mean, I think our goals around the podcast, or when we're sharing, it is for that knowledge piece, and, don't do what we did. We almost blew it. But in general, besides that, we are generally pretty private people, and did that here. What was your reasoning? Because this was one of those where I had my reasons, and we agreed that made sense, but I'm not sure we actually hammered it out. We're just like, okay, sounds good. Back as you were back about our business for 9 months, and that was one that occurred to me as I was thinking about this.
And I'd have to touch on that. It was possible because I had a really good pregnancy, so I didn't experience. Yeah, there were tough times in pregnancy, of course, but any of the typical, morning sickness or things that take women out and down during pregnancy. Ooh, and I wasn't showing very early or not a ton. So outside looking in, it's just my stomach was, my belly was discreet enough.
Right.
And I had just a really good pregnancy. I was able to move the whole time. I was able to work the whole time. So I was really lucky and fortunate in that regard to make that possible. But my reasonings, I had a few. A couple of the ones more prominent, I would say, was one. I just really loved the ability to like relish in the experience with you, and it was just such a amazing and intimate time for us, and for us just to experience together. Now we did tell family, but not all immediately. With some time, very close family knew, but that was it. And just to have that, like that small group of people, but mainly just you and I, and know and be able to share that, like that was just like a really amazing time. We didn't have all the noise. Nobody else knew. We could just share it together. I love that piece. Secondly, I was very conscious and mindful of not raising any red flags or raising any concerns with my employees, who of course we did tell, we had to prep, and that's the respectful thing. Of course we want them to know, but later in the game. But my vendors and customers, I did not want anybody to be concerned that things would change, that my pregnancy would somehow have me removed from the company, that my relationship with the business and with them, thus them, would change. Any of that, like I just didn't want to go there, and I didn't want anything to change. And I had my employees in mind. I didn't want the business affected. And reading through, so I was reading through different women's experiences that were, all of these women I was reading about were entrepreneurs, and they owned companies, much like myself. And a couple of them said in this interview that had they had the opportunity to go back when they were pregnant, they would have not shared the news with some of the people, the customers they worked with. And some of them had even gone on to say that they had lost business in the process because people were concerned that they were pregnant and they weren't going to be able to deliver on whatever it was, especially solo entrepreneurs, and I kept that in mind. And that made sense. And it's sad, but I understand why someone might think that. And truth be told, pregnancy and children, they can change you. I understand that. And there are times where maybe you won't be able to deliver in the same way you would. I didn't have that. So that was something, as I was reading those experiences and some of that insight, I was listening. And I really took a lot of that to heart, and that was one of the big factors for me.
Yeah, I think that sucks a little bit. Just the idea that, if I were to announce your pregnancy, there wouldn't be a run on customers, right? There wouldn't be this perceived risk about, Mick's wife being pregnant. But you as a business owner, and for the one woman you were describing, to say that her customers even preemptively left because of their fear of risk, somewhat blows my mind. And maybe I'm naive, or I'm just, I'm looking for a future that doesn't look like this one in spots. But that I hope if we correct some things along the way, that would be one of the things. And also too, just, the idea that yes, a very strong entrepreneur, you're the founder, but if you have the trust in that person that you would understand that they would have built an organization that was very strong with the right teammates, that was as unassailable as they could make it. We've used the word unassailable here before. And that would be the trust level to say, well, yeah, of course, yeah, that's wonderful for Britt, but at no point do I ever experience this as risk such that I need to take my business elsewhere just in case something happens, because that's what you'd be doing.
That's a great point, and that's exactly what my team and I did. We huddled together, and they really showed up. I don't think we missed a beat. I mean, I was able to pretty much, other than the week we were in the hospital, and you can't, for anyone that hasn't had a child, like when you're in the hospital, people are coming in every 5 minutes. There's appointments. Like it is, I don't think I was able to send an email out for 3 days without getting interrupted in a good way.
Yeah, sure.
They got to take care of you. But other than that week, I was able to work through it. But my team showed up, and we were able to prepare. And that's really important. You do have to build that those right team members for all different reasons. But if you are female or a male and you aren't planning on having a family, like just another reason to build a solid team so you can take a little bit of time or have time if you need it.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. Totally agree. But yeah, and yeah, I agree. But that was when we finally doubled back. I'm glad you shared that with the audience just because in 2024, that is still potentially a thing.
Yeah. And I didn't want to come off as disingenuous or like we were hiding something because that wasn't the intention at all.
No. Yeah. Interesting. I think for my part, I was even a little more focused on the science behind it. Clearly, I'm on the older side of being a dad, and
me too.
And you too. Yeah. That's right. Technically,
I'm
you're
geriatric.
geriatric, and I am really effing geriatric. I said, "See, Tommy, I didn't do that because I didn't want the YouTube algorithm to be upset with me." But it's very true, and that's how I feel about it. So I think I was a little more attuned to, if something happened, or if it wasn't meant to be, just because it gets harder as you get older on both sides, the piece that I contribute, the piece that you contribute. So I was very okay, just keeping that information to us for all the reasons that you said, but just taking it one step further. Gosh, if something happened, that's not something that I would want to have to walk back or explain away in a really public forum.
And I too, that was another reason, certainly, for sure.
Yeah, so that's a good one. So, again, 6 weeks in, I think I've seen
6 weeks today.
6 weeks today. It
Exactly.
seems like, I feel like I'm in interviewer mode today, which is great because you do such a good job of interviewing me. What's changed? And what in what 6 weeks is nothing unless you're up every 2 hours around the clock. Then 6 weeks is something different. But what's changed? What's different? I mean, a couple of things you put your fingers on that's different.
A couple of things would be impossible. Everything's changed.
Right.
Like literally everything, and that's just another thing I would have never expected. My entire, obviously, life has changed, but I have changed. And again, like I feel like I can usually explain things. Like so far, I have not been able to explain any of this. I can't wrap my head around it. But I am not the same person, and I can't explain it. Like I don't know. I feel like I've shed the old me, and not all of the old me, but just grown into a new one in so many ways. And I'm still figuring it out. Like I think I'm still figuring out who I am, and I think a lot of women that have babies, especially women that are really career oriented, and I've identified as that for so long. Then you have a kid. For me, the challenge has been I've leaned into being a businesswoman, and because of that, I have been. I wouldn't say not emotional, but very assertive, and I've had this identity for a reason, and it hasn't been a persona, but I've been this way because it has helped accelerate my business for so long, and I have become that person. And so now I'm like, okay, well that has been my identity, and that has helped what I believe get me ahead in certain things and allow me to grow a business and athletic career. And I don't want to lose that. But I also just don't feel like that person anymore. I feel so parts of that, but I don't feel that entirely. And now I feel just different. I don't know. I can't really describe it, but a whole different person.
But none of that is because this is my observation.
And I'm working through it. I think that's part of what I'm trying to say. I'm working through all this.
But from my side, as a person that's been with you, dawn to dusk for over 6 years now, I haven't experienced anything different from a get it done perspective. I mean, from a tenacity level as it relates to doing business, you are to my way of thinking, and I think your team would agree if they were sitting here listening. The same killer business person with comparable tenacity and all the things that you think might go away. I haven't experienced any of that. I mean, as even watching you, this evolution that you've gone through in transitioning to being a mom and everything that goes with that, I haven't seen any drop off as it relates to getting things done and what it takes and the drive that it takes to be a business owner while also being a mom.
So I don't believe it has. I don't think I've missed a beat or the company's missed a beat. I don't think. I mean, that's
sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, but but I would agree wholeheartedly. And here's the things that have changed. So my motivations have changed. So like my desire to do and to succeed is maybe even more now, but it's because of her and like for the family. I just thought of something. I have to write this down really quickly. And as I was building a business when I was younger in my 20s, I thought that it was about money. I wanted to make a lot of money, and I wanted to make a name for myself and all these things. And I think some of that was my motivation. And I think that is for a lot of us. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't.
Yep.
And, as we start to achieve those things, as we build businesses, and that's great. And I wanted all that for a long time. But as I've been sitting there with Moxy and you, like maybe doing nothing, maybe doing absolutely nothing, I think to myself, well, this is what it was all for. It was never for the money. It was never for anything else. It was like to build myself to be the person that I could be, to have a family and to be a mother. Like, this is what I've worked so hard for. And now I'm living in like, this is it. This is it. And the things that I once thought were productive, which would be working and sometimes working on things I didn't need to be, now might be like running with her or like going on a walk with her or being the three of us in a room doing nothing. Like, that is productivity to me. So like my whole mindset about what is productive has changed. My value of time has completely changed. So I am working. I'd be lying if I said I was working as much. I'm not working, not nearly as much. I'm working a lot less. The hours are less.
Let's be very clear though, because
the hours are less in quantity.
Right.
But they are laser focused, and they're sharp, they're clear, they're focused. So I think I'm getting just as much done in a lot less time. And it has me question where was I spending all this free time? Where was all this free time going? Because like a child takes up so much time. Like, what was I doing with that time? I think I was probably wasting a lot of it. And B, was I working so much on so many things that didn't matter?
Right.
Because I can tell you now, with getting just as much done, I think, with so many less hours, the answer is yes. So now I'm learning what matters and what doesn't. And some of the stuff that doesn't matter, you just don't need to spend time on it.
Right.
You don't have to sit in front of a computer. You don't have to feel that pain. Sometimes we feel like the more is better. The more painful it is, the better. And I'm sitting here now on the other side being like, that's not true at all. Like, I've got to shift my mind around that. Like, it's okay to not have to work. And I think I am going to find a happy medium. And let's not get it twisted. We're in 6 weeks. We're feeding her she needs so much right now. And so I think there's going to be a time where she's not going to need quite as much, and maybe I am able to pick up a few more hours. But there's a happy medium that I'm learning now that I probably overworked, and it was totally inefficient. What's the diminishing returns law of diminishing? And I think I'm experiencing or realizing that. And so I just value time in such a different way. And like, I don't waste a moment. Like, I am not sitting scrolling on social media or anything like that. Because every time I do that, it's 1 minute away from her.
Right.
And like, that is so crystal clear to me. Like, so squandering away time.
Well, that's some of the time that probably got reallocated too, right? Where when you did, that whole idea of time. Of course, time is a finite resource, right? They don't make any more of it. It's exactly what it is. But when you have a significant life change like that, and you have something vying for massive amounts of your time, all of a sudden, all those fringe things that seemed like, you just talk about scrolling on social media, right? If you had time to do it, be like, yeah, I have time, so I will throw some of my disposable time, disposable income, disposable time at that. Not something you'd ever dream of doing now.
Ever.
Never.
So, it's my motivations have changed. My perspective on a lot of things have changed. My value of time, my understanding of love has completely changed. And I guess hasn't completely changed, but when you enter a child and I think my understanding of love has expanded, I would say, and evolved. The other thing too that has been something I didn't necessarily expect is the how much this has brought my our family together. You know, I didn't think it'd be possible to get closer with my parents and my sister, but this whole experience, I think it's done that for us. And it's been incredible getting to see my parents become grandparents and my sister become an aunt, which I did not expect. And what a child and a baby can do for a family and just growing the bond, that's been really just so great. Like to spend that time and to, I don't know, just something I knew it would bring us all together even more. But that's been a very, very cool thing to experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally
So,
agree.
and I would just go back to like the motivation piece. So one thing I do want to touch on, because I think it's cool, and one thing I want to do is document the journey a little bit. So I've got, and you know this, one of the things we've talked about, I want to get into ultramarathons like so much. And this whole time we were talking about it, I was pregnant. So I knew like I couldn't go after that goal, but now I can. So one of the things I wanted to do is within 6 to 8 months postpartum, run an ultramarathon, which is really hard if you're a woman and you know what your body goes through. I mean, it's a very challenging goal, but I really want to set it. And now my motivation is like, I can't wait to see you and Moxy at the finish line.
Right.
Like it's like I think about it constantly, and so that's
a motivator.
yeah, yes,
Yeah.
so
Inspiration for sure.
inspiration, motivation, both. I think both.
Yep.
I could keep going on here, but I do want to punt that back to you. Do you understand what I'm saying when I say I don't feel like I've lost my old self, but I definitely don't feel like my old self. I feel like a new person.
Yeah, I do. I think
You might be able to articulate it.
Yeah, I'll try. If anything, it might be a little different for me, only because having 3 daughters, I have some familiarity with the experience that you don't have yet. But am I different? Yeah, sure. And I don't know that I will attempt to. I would say that all the things that we discussed together as a duo, right? Our experience of the last 6 weeks together, and the scarcity of time. Let's use that's a great word. The scarcity of time, and it's really not, right? There's exactly the same amount of time now as there was on the day before or the week before, but how that time gets consumed. And one thing that I have been very intentional about is making sure that while the demands of my time have gone up, right? Because when you have a newborn, it consumes, being very intentional about not letting it take away from certain things that are super important, like the girls. So I would say that's something that I've been hyper aware of, and making sure that if there's a scarcity of time, that it never gets taken from them, that something else will have to get sacrificed, or I'll have to get more productive, right? We talk about productivity all the time. How do I, with my time being fragmented a little bit more, I'm trying to pick the right words here so I explain it to the audience correctly. I either have to get more productive, meaning I have to get more output out of that static input, because I have 60 minutes in every hour and 24 hours in every day. Or I have to eliminate some of those things. So something that I've been hyper aware of, and I always have been, but Brooke, Grace, and Olivia, and making sure that no matter what happens, that they don't ever get shorted for time, and done correctly. If we all spend more time together, which is what you just talked about as a byproduct of this, then I would be with them more minutes and hours, not less minutes and hours.
Yeah, and it's a really unique situation, and I think really, I hope blossoms into just this amazing thing for the old, as we'll call them, the 3 older girls, and Moxy. Like Moxy getting to learn and have these older women in her life as role models. Well, I mean, they're going to be her role models. I mean, with that age difference.
Yep.
And then hopefully them being able to embrace her. And I'm excited to watch that develop, and also equally dedicated to making sure that, we are prioritizing all of them and the relationship as a whole and as a family. But that just goes back into that prioritization and realizing what matters and what doesn't, like it immediately slaps that into focus, like that the forefront and center.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Couple more ideas. Obviously, we're talking a lot about love today, not as much about business, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think we do in our 37 episodes. I think it is that we posted so far. We do get into this every so often. The other thing that occurred to me too. We talk about a lot of crossover experiences. And until now, the biggest crossover experience we talked about was athletics. Your soccer and my golf. And how that has made us into more fierce competitors, how it's affected our preparation, how we go after preparation in ultimately winning the game called business, which is the one we play now on a day in and day out basis. I guess one thing I was thinking about is, have you identified any, crossovers that would make you be a better mom? There's this whole new component, and what are those crossovers, or how do those crossovers affect being a mom?
And vice versa. How being a mom could help me be a better business person.
Yep.
So I think I will never forget one of my teammates just coming in one day telling me, I was like, he's like, you're pretty guarded, Britt. Like you don't share a lot. And me thinking I tell him everything. I'm like, what? Like I share everything. And this experience has definitely made me, and I hate the word emotional, but maybe more vulnerable, or I think just this ability to open up a little bit. And I think that is truly going to help me as a business owner, not in the way of being weak,
Right.
Nothing
Oh,
that
yeah.
looks like that.
Yeah.
Just being more open and honest and raw. And, as you know, I don't, and this has nothing to, again, this is going to sound weak, but I don't cry or really show emotion. And I've showed more emotion in the last 6 weeks than in our entire 6-7 years of being together.
Oh yeah.
And part of that for me is just like when you have a child, something when you have a child, they're so helpless and selfless and pure and innocent. Like the most innocent thing. And like they are completely, you are responsible for them. So anything that goes wrong or they don't get, it's on you. It's just like responsibility. And you just feel I feel that so deeply, like so deeply that I just get like, when I look at her face, I just like, oh my God, I get emotional just talking about it. But I do think that's going to help me as a business person, just maybe even to understand people better, or people that have children, for one. Like now I understand, like when they're talking about their kids stuff, like I've always wanted my employees to go experience things with their kids, and that now I really want them to. Now I understand what it means. So I think I'm going to become a much better business leader. The other thing with Moxy that I love so much is, and this is every single minute of every single day, because she's only 6 weeks, is everything that she does is new and it's a first time for her.
Right.
And when you get to see a human life experience everything for the first time, like see something for the first time or learn something for the first time, it's like nothing you can explain. Again, I can't explain anything, but that's what I feel. That's
Right.
why this is so crazy to me,
Yeah.
because I can usually talk things through and I can't yet.
Yep.
But, and I have gone down this rabbit hole now because, again, I feel so deeply responsible for this innocent, helpless soul, sweet soul. So they've gone down the rabbit hole of like, how do you develop? How do I give her every opportunity to explore and develop and become the best human that she can be? And that has become a real curiosity for me because I love her so much. And it's like this pursuit of curiosity, much like business has been for me. And like just wanting to learn as much as I can about parenthood and being a great mom and the things I can do to help elevate her as a human. And so I think like that piece of it is so relevant to business, because I've been the same with business. I've gone down every rabbit hole. How can I be the best business leader? How can I build this business and this team? And we look at all these strategies and approaches, and I listen to podcasts and I read and I execute all this. It's very, very similar. Now it's just in a different lane.
Yeah.
What do you feel? How do you feel about that?
Again, completely agree. I think that one thing I was going to interject, but then I would have just interrupted you. Just that idea of weakness. I mean, I think our audience probably knows this already, but we're rarely, if ever, talking about weakness when we're talking about sharing things. I mean, do we talk about? I mean, vulnerability is the right word, which is not a bad thing or a negative thing ever on the Love and Business podcast show. So man,
See, you're being vulnerable.
Holy shit.
See, you wanted to model. You wanted to model.
I did. I just wanted to show everybody how that works.
Yes. But no, I agree, and I'm learning that. I'm learning it like as you see how people respond and react to it, and it's people are receptive to that because it's relatable and it shows you give a shit, like the things you care about.
Do you feel like that vulnerability is this is actually a Love and Business thing. Do you feel like that is I have mentioned many times on this podcast how I got it wrong as it relates to the newer generations that are coming through, you know, Tommy's generation and the generations between me and the ones that are now entering the workforce. Do you feel like vulnerability is any more valued now than it was in the past? We know in the past, whether, you know, the boomers, there was nothing that looked like vulnerability from them. Do you feel like that's more valued? Actually more valued?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's talked about a lot more. What I've seen is, though, I do think it's more valued. So much so that I think there's how do I put this? A performative vulnerability where people are trying to embrace it and it's almost an act.
Oh, right. So in absent authenticity, right?
Yes.
That's a problem.
I see a lot of that, especially on social media. It's like this persona. But when you have like the real can't fake it, can't hide it, I am raw and vulnerable and feeling this so deeply, you can't mistake that. Like it's so obvious. And I think it's more I do. I think it's more valued, more acceptable, maybe more talked about.
Right. Yeah.
Do you not?
No, I do. I again, I don't do as much. I'm not in the social media realm nearly as much. So I'm looking for it in business, and I would say, you know, there's definitely a lag there, and maybe it's just that in business, you don't, unfortunately, I'll say this the way unfortunately, you don't get the opportunities to experience that with as many people as you would like to, either because, you know, you're moving at such high pace and your business relationships are your business relationships, and you just don't get a lot of time to dig much underneath of that initial layer, right? You don't get to dig closer to the core. So maybe that's why it feels a little absent until you do have people in the business world that you do get to know over time. And you spend enough time, you get past the updates of current events. So you and I talk about that all the time. One of the greatest things about this podcast for us is we get way past current events, right? I mean, we don't come home from work and sit in the same space and tell each other about in a 10-minute period about our day, right? We get super deep here, and then that just infiltrates everything else about our lives. So I think back to your question about vulnerability in the business world, I think if it feels more absent, it's simply because you don't get as much time to dig past the surface layer, right? The current updates, events, or whatever the business topics are that you truly have to transact together, right? Or you truly have to work through. When do you grab one of your really trusted, valued customers and say, "How are you, man?" You know, or "How are you?" You know, Sally or female, male, it doesn't matter. It doesn't happen enough, and maybe that's why some of that you don't experience that, or you get to see that in the business world. That said, there still are a lot of people in the business world who don't think it's okay to share that it would be weakness. And go back to your point about the female in the podcast who lost business, to show that vulnerability, anything that could look like weak could look like risk, right? And then you jump down that rabbit hole from vulnerability, which is just, hopefully, a very authentic human emotion, to weakness, which then translates to risk, which would then have consequences. And that sucks. Like that's the part of it where it gets just off track and would have people like my dad. My dad would be like, well, that's right. That's why you shove that vulnerability crap in the drawer where it belongs. Right. So that's one of the differences for sure.
I think another crossover would be for mothers and fathers is when you have a baby, particularly newborns, but just kids, you lose control all of your control. Like you before, as a businesswoman, I am so type A. Everything was under my control. Like now I have lost so much. I don't have that control with a newborn. Like she's going to do what she's going to do right now.
Yep.
And I've had to understand that and flow with that. And I think like taking that into business, which I think my employees are probably getting a kick out of seeing me like this, because they're like, thank you. This is what she needed. Like settle down.
You don't get to call the shots here anymore. Right?
A little story. When we were in our meeting where we were creating our company values, which you were leading for us, one of the words I came up with was like intensity. And my whole team was like, no,
we don't value that nearly as much as you do.
We don't value like that. They're like, you're intense. We don't. And so now I think they're laughing like, oh, like, because you have to like some of that just goes away. And so I think now being able to roll with the punches a little bit. Like if I could not work out, just tie an example, at like 4 a.m, before I had Moxy,
you were a bear.
It was horrific. Like that would wreck my entire day.
Yep.
Now it's like, okay, I'm gonna get it done, but it could be at any time. Like so that's a very little example, but this has pervaded my entire life. And like, I'm out of control right now in the best way, and I understand it, and I'm learning how to deal with that. So I think that's another thing to mention, a great crossover that could. A lot of this is making how a mother would make me a better business person, and not the opposite. But I'm sure it goes both ways.
Well, I think I've got to watch you firsthand. I mean, I hope it's okay that I say this. Your incredible discipline around diet prior to being pregnant. Mm-hmm. It was great for me to watch you be able to expand some of your horizons and not blame it on Mox necessarily, but you give up some of that selfishness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you're operating exclusively for yourself, you can be selfish. I mean, that is a thing. And when it came to, knowing that you were growing a baby and had her to feed too, that, it was like, well, I can't do that. I'm eating for 2 and I have to make sure that I'm getting her the nutrients and the diet that she needs, which I know was incredibly uncomfortable for you, especially early on, where it's like, wow, I'm supposed to eat that, and that's going to be good for us. And giving up that type of control has been interesting for me to watch from you as well, as close as we are and as well as I know you.
Yeah, and
but you did it, and kudos to you.
Well, yeah, I'm not, again, if we're being open and vulnerable here, because I know a lot of women struggle with it, or a lot of people struggle with it. It was beyond discipline. Like it was getting into just so restrictive, and like the whole, with 5 or 6 years, I've really struggled with that. And I want to hit on that because I have this big word written on the paper, and it's selfless.
Right.
And that is like one of the if I had to pick one word about parenthood, it is that you truly become selfless. And it's the most freeing and amazing thing. Like my needs, of course they're important. You have to care about yourself to be able to care about anybody else. We get it. Yada, yada, yada. But truly selfless. Like she right now, and not just she, family is really the only thing that matters. And my needs are so secondary. And I might have said that before, but until you're a parent, like I don't think you can really embrace that. And it's the best feeling ever to feel like her needs are really number one, and like you will do anything for that. But I do want to continue on this thread and this train of thought with the idea about the crossover between business and being a parent, because I think the next question a lot of people will have is, well, Mick, how do you intend to have a very young child and run your business? And probably the same to me. Or do you intend to have like these same goals and continue to build your businesses? I think that would be the next question a lot of people would have. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. I think so. One thing I do want to say, and if my, as the father of a 22, 20, and 16-year-old, I am certainly guilty of some selective memory. I can promise you, I don't exactly remember the newborn days of Brooke, Grace, and Liv, but what I can tell you now, 6 weeks in, is it's hard. It really is. It's hard, and I'm saying that because it's the truth, and I think it's important that that's mentioned, that the 2-hour feedings and the demands while still running a business, and this is all part and parcel to your question is, look, my intention would be to do exactly what I have done all along, and we've always talked on here about the reason we do it is because the rising tide does raise all boats, and those boats are more important than ever to me. I mean, I don't intend to stop doing what I do and busting ass to raise the tide for all of the boats just because we have a daughter. That hasn't changed my focus. If anything, I think it's probably steeled it. It's made me very aware that to get it all done, it is going to take a different type of focus and a different type of planning and a different type of preparation. And it might take more hours and right. I might have to do both. I might have to infuse a little more input because of the bandwidth requirements elsewhere. Brooke, Grace, and Liv and Mox, they will not sacrifice time in the process. So it hasn't changed at all. Nothing of the sort has changed. But it's definitely demanding, and I have all the respect. I mean, we do it together. We're each doing half of the whole, which we've talked about on here. And we have help. We have a tremendous amount of help, and it is still it's a challenge. Like it's hard.
Yes, I do want to emphasize that we have a lot of help. We have family. We just had an au pair come in on Monday, which we'll talk about that because you struggle too with being a new mom and then bringing in help. Like that's really challenging too. It's so much happens at once that you're trying to understand.
Right. But challenging because pawning her off. Like
Pawning
that was the term that's used, right? Because I want to challenging. What do you mean challenging? Extra hands or extra hands? No, there's the emotional side of handing your child over, your firstborn, to go back to work, if you will, right? That's the battle.
And yes, yeah. Well, I don't even want to go down that lane, but we will.
Yep.
So it would be unfair if we didn't say that we have help, because I think if you don't, you're in a different situation. I know how single parents do it, like the real MVPs.
Yep.
Holy shit, I don't know. It's wow, just incredible.
Yeah.
And single parents do not get enough love and probably support and shout outs because this shit is hard and I just don't know how you do it by yourself.
Yep.
But to yes end what you said, I think for me, it has just steeled and solidified even more. Like I even more now want to grow a great business and really it's about the people, like grow a business with great people and build great people and give a lot of people an opportunity and a great quality of life, and do that with maybe multiple businesses, also pursue athletic endeavors. And I think one thing, I was listening to a podcast today talking about how as a parent, your kids are always watching, which we know. She's too young to understand, but she will one day. And there's a difference between kids watching you and watching you in the trenches getting dirty as opposed to just sitting behind a computer. Like I want my kids to be able to seeing me like get dirty. Maybe not what's the word? Not literally.
I literally get dirty.
But
right?
Well, I mean, like running on a trail in an ultra marathon, like they're gonna see me, like just like see us, the hard work. There's something about that.
Turning wrenches out back, right?
But just
turning
like,
wrenches.
Yeah, like the real stuff. Like I don't know if they're gonna get as much between seeing your parents at home on a computer for 8 hours. Like let's get in there, let's do this stuff. Like that's what I want her to see and all of the girls to see. So I have no intentions, and it's gonna look different. And how we get there and the approach might be different, at least for now, like definitely for now.
Yep.
But it's all about the figured out factor.
Yeah. Look, I think we've given our real time. We've given our listeners a glimpse into what they can expect going forward.
Yeah, we have so much more to now share content. I also have now realized the challenges and also the beauty of being a woman and being very career minded and also having a child and wanting to do both and being able to do both.
Sure.
And I think that is something that so many other women are thinking about, are struggling with, are desiring. And so I intend to put out with you a ton of content about that.
Yep.
And I'm hoping that the audience, particularly the female audience, has will want to share in that and collaborate in that, because it's wild, and
Yeah.
I'm again still working through it myself,
Yeah.
learning.
And for my part, I think, I would intend to share what doing half of the whole looks like. There is a lot of situations and relationships out there where each is doing 100% of half. And we've talked about that, where, mom raises exclusively and dad provides exclusively. And that's been going on for centuries. Like that is not a new idea. It goes all the way back to hunters and gatherers. I mean, it's that old. It is core DNA for us. So for my part, sharing what doing half of the whole looks like, doing every other feedings, we laugh, right? We got into our groove like we did in the mask business, where we numbered the feedings, right? There's 4 of them a night. There's a 1-4 and there's a 2-3, right? I mean, just dropped right in logistically to how we run things and how our relationship works, and how we, how we're each accountable to doing half of the whole.
And the last thing, if anybody has any suggestions, please hit us up in the comment box, because I still have not figured out how, and I don't know if there is a solution to this, how we can achieve all of these things and spend as much time as we want with Moxy without taking that out from sleeping less.
Right.
Like, is there another way, or is that just like you just sleep less?
Right. Yeah. Maybe it is.
That's one of my number one questions right now.
Well, we'll share aggressively. If anybody has any nuggets for us, we're all ears. We're coachable. We're happy to learn. We don't need to figure everything out on our own. You can join our war room in that regard.
Yes.
You're welcome into our war room.
So please,
we'll take
put
it.
some comments.
Yes, and thank you. What an unusually wonderful episode.
And happy 6 weeks to us and to Moxy.
Yes, indeed. As always, thank you so much for watching Love and Business. That was a fun episode to shoot today.
And it adds a whole different dynamic to our life and to our content now. So you can expect moving forward us to be talking about motherhood and parenthood as it relates to having a very vibrant and challenging career. And this is something that I know a lot of people can relate to, and we want to hear your stories. So please subscribe if you're interested in this content moving forward. The subscribes make a huge difference for us, and we'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, please don't miss it. Take a moment and subscribe.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Welcome to H2E38 Talks for the Superstars. Tonight, with guest, the incredible